Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. We're going to return to a brewery that is featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, and this brewery are known mainly for their sour beers, and they're one of the more established breweries here in the country as well. So always nice to try their new beers. Fingers crossed this is another good one, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head a little bit north of me here in Lund to Landskrona, where I used to teach science and maths, of course, and we're going to have a look at yet another beer from Brekeriet. So this particular beer is called the Tistron. It comes in at 4.8% ABV, and this one is a sour ale with blackcurrants added into it. You might also be noticing that this beer is in a can, and this is the first canned beer that I've had from Brekeriet, and that was one of the main reasons that I bought it actually. It was the first one in a can that I've seen from Brekeriet, plus the fact I haven't had something from Brekeriet in quite a little while actually. So I thought it was about time to do another review from these guys, but very curious to see how it turns out. Fingers crossed it's another good beer as I said, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it. So let's crack on then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done it from Brekeriet before, and you will no doubt see more added into that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brekeriet then, on to my brewery notes once again. So Brekeriet, as I've told you all before, were originally based in Jørsløv, just outside of Malmö, but they're now based in Landskrona, a little bit further north. But the company was founded back in 2011 by the Ek brothers. This is Fredrik, Christian and Andre, and it's a specialist brewery in wild beers using Brettanomyces and Lactobacillus. And these guys were the first breweries in Sweden to do this, and they remain the only completely specialised sour beer brewery as far as I'm aware. But let me know in the comment section below if that is not the case anymore. But the original brewery was based in the old brew house in Jørsløv, which was actually a share brewery for local farmers, but they brewed their first beers in 2012, and this brewery had a very modest production of only 500 litres per brew, and this gave them a yearly capacity of around 38,000 litres. But over the following years they continued to grow their sales and export some of their beers. Quite a lot of their beer was being exported over to Denmark and things, of course, but over the following years they continued to grow, and from 2015 they've been operating out of a newer brewery in Landskrona, and this brewery can produce 20 hectolitres per brew, and they now have a fermentation capacity of around 80 hectolitres. That figure may be a little bit inaccurate, so take that with a pinch of salt. I think they have been growing their fermentation capacity even beyond that. But initially they produced their Wild Bunch beers continuously in Landskrona, and this was their non-sour series, but they also brewed their Sour Patch mixed fermentation sours and specialty one-off beers in Jørsløv for about a year and a half before moving all of the production to Landskrona in 2017, and they created a separate area for mixed fermentation as well. These days they are I think they are producing just all mixed fermentation beers. I think there are one or two regular beers that they release, but those are not so common. These guys are pretty, as I say, pretty much a dedicated sour brewery. There's very rare to find a non-sour beer from these guys actually. But they also have their Veiled series, which is their barrel aged series. They release new beers from this every couple of months, and they use a variety of different yeast strains in their beers these days as well. In 2020 they also started distilling, and they released their first products in the latter part of that year. And one of the really interesting things about this brewery, if we take a step back in the history, was that in 2014 they caused a little bit of a stir because they withdrew completely from Systembolaget, citing the bureaucracy of the system and the nationalised system, because it used to be very difficult, but I think Systembolaget have made it a lot easier for the craft breweries in recent years. But in 2014 they decided that they were going to focus on exports, and they eventually made a return in 2016. And as of July 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 200 different beers. So they have been putting their output up again. over the last little while, and they are a very, very prolific brewery. But over the years, I've had some really, really nice beers from these guys. Sour and Salt is a very good one. Purple Rain I really enjoyed. Wrapped in Red. Swedish Ninja that they did with Pipeworks over in Chicago was one of my favourites as well. You know, those are very, very nice beers actually. So yeah, they've done some really, really good stuff over the years. I keep an eye on the new things that they're releasing, but yeah, these guys do some very nice old school sours. It's not really these kind of sweeter, creamy sort of sours and things that you'll get from Brekeriet. These ones are the proper old school, kind of lighter and more kind of tart sours. So yeah, if that's your thing, you will enjoy the beers that Brekeriet are going to be putting out there. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Brekeriet for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a look at the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open up. As you can see, the artwork on the can is a little bit different. You know, it's got a little bit of kind of watercolour and things behind it, just because obviously it's a slightly different style of label now that it's on a can. This is a 330ml can. I think I paid about 35 Swedish krona for this one, so about €3.50 for the can. Somewhere in the region of, you know, about, you know, £2.80 sterling, something like that, and I guess probably about $4 something. Maybe, yeah, but a little 330ml can, this one, and as we said, this is a 4.8% sour ale with black currants in it. I was going to say blackberries there. I always mix up blackberries and black currants, but it says on the back here the Sour Patch. So the Tistron is part of our collection of beers known as the Sour Patch, fermented with different wild yeast strains and lactic acid bacteria cultures. So yeah, this one contains wheat malt and a bit of rye as well, and some hops and a little bit of coriander and salt. So a bit of lactose in there as well. So this could be quite interesting. I'm wondering with the fact that they've released this in a can, is this going to be like a sort of core range beer? Because the thing with Brekeriet is they don't have a core range as such, but there's always beers that seem to reappear all the time. There are some of the popular ones that really seem to reappear quite a lot actually. But yeah, Brekeriet do some very, very nice stuff. But yeah, 330ml can, this one. Let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. The Tistron 4.8% black currant sour. So yeah, let's go for it. I'm wondering if this is the first beer I've had from Brekeriet that has lactose in it as well. Probably not, and I've probably just not realised, but yeah, interesting. There we are. But yeah, this looks very, very nice. I've had this beer sitting in the fridge for about a month actually and been meaning to get around to it, and finally we are getting this one filmed. But yeah, before the head disappears in this beer, you can see it poured with about a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of creamy coloured head, but obviously it's got a little bit of a pinkish tinge to it because of the colour of the beer. And yeah, you can see the colour of this beer is absolutely lovely. It's that kind of crimson cherry red actually. It's about the same colour as a Gibson SG guitar. It's really like that. It's absolutely lovely. I don't know another way that you can describe this. It looks a little bit brighter to you guys on the camera. I can see on the viewfinder that it looks a little bit brighter on the camera than it does to the naked eye. But yeah, I think describing this one as a sort of the same colour as a Gibson SG, you know, the Heritage Cherry colour that they use for painting their guitars, I think that's not too far off that, but a lovely sort of, you know, crimson cherry red colour, this one. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but I mean overall it does look pretty nice, and you can see that the beer has a lovely little bit of a natural haze to it, but when it's got wheat and rye and things in it like that, that kind of makes sense. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use, that usually determines the magnitude of the colour. Two, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. And then adjuncts such as fruits, as you have in this beer, and barrel aging will also play a role in that as well. But when you've got sour beers like this, if you put berries and things in them, they're going to be the main thing that affects the colour of the beer. And then the level of haze is usually dependent on, you know, it can be dependent a little bit on the yeast and any wheat and oats and things like that that are in the beer. So yeah, you're getting a little bit of everything in this beer. That's where all of these kind of factors come from, if you like. But yeah, nothing particularly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider what color, when you consider what type of beer it is. Brain is not working in this video, guys, my apologies. But yeah, nothing surprising about this beer in terms of the appearance when you consider what style it is. So I think it's about time that we have a little look at the aroma and see how we get on. So yeah, let's go for it. Oh, now that's interesting. So this beer, it smells, you know, that smell that you get when it just starts to rain and all the you know, you smell that earthy, grassy kind of thing in the air. This beer's got a little bit of that in the base of it, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, the backbone of this beer has this sort of woody, herbally, earthy type thing to it. So that's really interesting. But I think the more that you smell of it and your nose adjusts to it, it really mellows out a little bit more. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly what to make of that. Yeah, it starts to lean more towards the juicy kind of fruity sort of things. The further that you go into the nose with it, it really sweetens up and you get the juicy fruits and a little bit of the kind of tartness out of the beer. But yeah, the backbone of this one is kind of like woody and herbal and earthy. As I say, it smells, the aroma of this really, the backbone of it really reminds me of that smell you get when it rains and you get that earthy, grassy, kind of mossy type thing in the air. I say that because I went out for a wee walk the other day on the coast, and it absolutely just, the heavens just opened, and that was the smell that I was getting. You know, when it's been absolutely pelting it down, and you get you just get that earthy, mossy, herbally kind of thing in the air. But yeah, the backbone of this beer really reminds me of that. But the more that you smell of it, you do get a little bit of a kind of bready character in there. You can smell a little bit of the kind of rye, brown, bready backbone to the beer. It really does get a little bit of a grainy character. There are one or two little very slightly woody elements in this one. But yeah, definitely a bit of a brown bready, bread crusty backbone in there. Some woody, earthy, grassy, herbally kind of things in there as well. But other than that, I don't think there's too much to say about the malty side of it. It's a bit difficult to pick up anything from like the lactose. I mean, you might expect the lactose to kind of cream the beer up and smoothen it out a little bit. And of course, there's wheat in there as well. And you can detect a little bit of a white bready character underneath the fruity part of the beer. But yeah, the backbone of this beer is quite interesting. I'm curious to see how that's going to translate into the flavour. But yeah, that's interesting. We'll see how that goes. It's a bit of a difficult malty, yeasty backbone to describe this, but yeah, certainly curious to see how that will translate into the flavour, as I've said. But on the hoppy side of things, you definitely get a little bit of earthiness out of this one. There's some nice big floral aromatic qualities in there, which I can really enjoy. But you've also got you have that lovely. But there's quite a bit of a grassy, citrusy note to this one as well. I'd be curious to know what hops they've used in this beer. I'd love to go up and do a wee interview with the guys at Brekeriet at some point, so I'll need to see about organising that over the next few months. But yeah, I think that the way that the aroma in this beer goes together is really quite interesting, that's for sure. But yeah, definitely, as I say, green component's got a little bit of earthiness to it, a nice bright floral aromaticity, a touch spicy, then you've got some nice grassy, you definitely have some nice kind of grassy, zesty characters coming out of the beer. So yeah, that's very interesting for sure. That is very interesting. But yeah, let's have a little look at the fruity part of the beer then. So the fruity side of this beer is really interesting because it is very, very tart. And the black, you know, the thing with currants compared to berries is currants always give you a slightly more juicy character, if that makes sense. It's a bit of a lighter and juicy character, whereas the berries are going to give you a really oily and sharp and tart type note. So yeah, you'll notice that out of this beer. You will notice that out of the beer straight away, actually. So yeah, you get a lot of tartness out of this beer, but the tartness comes across as being a lot more kind of citricy. So it's almost like you've got a really sharp citricy tartness to this one, but then you've got the black currants in the background, I think. And there are one or two little other subtleties in there. You know, you've got a wee bit of a figgy note, you've got a wee bit of a a kind of, you know, there's a wee touch of like a candied strawberry in there, but the tartness and sharpness out of this beer for me actually comes across as really citricy. So the aroma in this is actually really interesting. It's not exactly what I thought it was going to be honest with you. But yeah, I think it's really interesting how it all pieces together. So yeah, take a little bit of time to go over the aroma of this one. This beer certainly has got me curious from that perspective, but I think it's about time that we try this one then. So yeah, this one is the Tistron, a 4.8% blackcurrant sour from Brekeriet in Landskrona here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. The first beer that I'm having from these guys in a can. So yeah, let's go for it then. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah. This is interesting, this one. It is very nice and light and drinkable, actually. That's the thing. It's not anywhere near as puckering as I thought it was going to be from the aroma. I thought with the level of citricy character and almost tannin kind of thing that you were getting out of this beer, I thought it was going to be quite a bit more puckering than it is, but it's actually quite mellow and just quite easy going. So yeah, that's interesting for sure as well. Yeah. So where do we start with this one then? It's interesting because, you know, that earthy, woody, kind of grassy sort of thing I was talking about with this beer, that really takes a back seat when you go into the flavour. But yeah, it's definitely there. You can really get that on the back of the palate. So yeah, this is an interesting beer, this one. It's very light and very sessionable. It feels a little bit different to the beers that I've had from Brekeriet in the past. But yeah, experiment with new things. That's never a bad thing. But let's try and break this down for you a little bit and explain the flavour a little bit more kind of in depth. I think one of the things with Brekeriet as well is I think they've, you know, over the years, I think they've kind of developed a lot of their own yeast strains and stuff like this, because the Brekeriet beers always taste pretty unique in a sense. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's their own yeast strains that they've just developed over the years that they're playing around with in these things. And yeah, I think it comes across just really, really interestingly, this one. So the backbone of the beer, when you go right across the middle of your palate, it really has this sort of smooth, woody character to it, and that goes right across the middle third of your tongue, and to a degree it stays there in the back third of your palate as well. On top of that little kind of smoother, woody layer that it has, you can feel, pardon me, the rye giving you a little bit of brown bread, and then you can feel on top of that, I think, the wheat giving you a little bit of a kind of white bready smoothness, and they also, you know, they're also contributing to that, just that smooth backbone that the beer has. The malt base, I think, is actually quite straight shooting in a lot of ways. Yeah, the middle third of your palate, you will notice that when you first take the beer in, it has a wee bit of a kind of, it does have a wee bit of that kind of herbally, earthy, grassy kind of thing. You'll feel that coming out from, you know, underneath. But like I say, smooth, woody backbone, bit of rye bread, bit of wheat and white bread sitting on top of it. And yeah, I do like how that goes together in the beer. So the malty, the middle third of your palate on this one is remarkably kind of straightforward actually. So yeah, I don't think we really need to say too much more about that. Wood, rye type brown bread, then a little bit of white bread, and it's very smooth on top of this. That's interesting. But yeah, on the back third of your palate, then border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you've got a little bit more of a kind of bready build up in there, a wee bit of a kind of you can feel a little bit of an almost bread crusty type quality. Then on the back third of your palate, you can feel, again, there's a wee bit of the woodiness in there, but you get a little bit more of the rye sort of is ramped up a little bit on that back third of your palate. So I think you do get a bit more of a kind of rye, bready type thing in there. And then on top of that, you can feel some of the yeast. And it's within this kind of more airy, taller, yeasty point on the back third of the palate. This is where you start to get a little bit more of that kind of grassy, earthy, kind of mossy thing. That, you know, the thing that I was talking about with the aroma, this is where you start to get those kind of, that type of flavour out of the beer, that kind of big, the earthy note. It's mixing in with the yeast thing. So yeah, back third of your palate, bit of woodiness, it's thicker, kind of more grainy rye bread in there, and then you've got those more airy, you've got those more sort of airy yeasty notes, and within that you've got all these earthy, herbally type characters. So yeah, the malty and yeasty backbone in this beer is quite interesting, and it's quite different from what we've had from Brekeriet before. But yeah, I think that covers that part of the beer. Let's focus on the hoppy and the sour side of the beer then. So back corners of the palate, there's definitely a wee bit of earthiness in there, you can feel that, and that builds a good bridge with the yeasty characters we've just been talking about. But as you move further forward, you can feel it develops a little bit of a herbal quality, and as you push towards the front corners of the palate, it's definitely got a little bit more of a kind of floral, aromatic-y side of things. Just you know, there's a nice little bit of floral aromaticity on the front corners of the palate. Then round the front curve of the tongue, the beer is a little bit lighter and more yeah, it's a little bit lighter and more kind of grassy and citrusy in a sense. So yeah, that's interesting for sure. So the hops give the beer a nice little bit of depth actually. But yeah, I think it will be something like, you know, Hercules or something like that. I think it's one of the slightly higher alpha acid German hops that could be in this, because there's a wee bit of noble character to this. But I'd be surprised if it was something, you know, the other thing it could be would be like a little bit of an American hop, maybe just Columbus or something like that. I think it'll either be a slightly higher alpha acid German hop, or yeah, a wee bit of Columbus or something like that. So yeah, interesting as well. I'd love to, as I said, I'd love to know what hops they choose and how they choose the hops for these sour beers. But let's focus on the fruity and sour part of the beer now. So front third of your palate, it's interesting because when you take a bit of a bigger gulp of this beer, then you start to get more of that earthy, woody kind of thing out of this one. But yeah, front third of your palate then, border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. There's a wee bit of a kind of rye bready sort of thing. The base of that front third of your palate, again, is a little bit kind of smoother, and I'd say yeah, it's the kind of brown rye bready type qualities that sit on top of that. The fruity side of the beer is quite interesting too. I mean, as I always say, on that front third of your palate you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So on the back of that front third of your palate you get a little bit of a light sort of figgy type quality out of the beer, and then just behind the very front tip of the tongue you've got a sharp, as I say, you've got that sharper tart kind of note out of it. And yeah, I think that goes together really nicely in this one for sure. But yeah, just behind that front kind of tip of the tongue, I think that's, you know, you can feel just a little bit of that sort of tanniny type quality in there. So on the front half of that front third of your tongue, you get the nice kind of juicy black curranty elements, then you get the sharper notes just from the kind of citricy sour part of the beer sitting in behind that. So like I say, like I was picking up in the aroma, pardon me, it's like the black currants are there, but I don't feel the tartness really comes from there. I feel it's more like a kind of citrusy tartness you're getting out of this beer. So that's kind of quite interesting, because from what I remember in the previous Brekeriet beers, the ones that were more berry orientated sours, the sourness really came from, you know, the adjunct fruit, if you like. So that's interesting too. The other thing you're going to notice is that around the front kind of tips of the tongue you can feel that juicy, you can really feel that juicy blackcurranty type vibe out of the beer as well. So yeah, it's really interesting how that goes together. So yeah, thumbs up to, yeah, definitely thumbs up to Brekeriet for how this beer goes about its business, that's for sure. But yeah, on the I think that's all we really need to say about the flavour of the beer. So we can round off the review by talking about the mouthfeel a little bit. So yeah, mouthfeel wise, This one, you know, it's quite a light-bodied beer. It's at the top end of light-bodied for me. The carbonation is very smooth. It's got that typical kind of clean, wet mouthfeel that you'd expect of a Nordic beer, of course. So good bit of that in there. In terms of IBUs and things, it's a very low IBU beer, this one. I'd say, you know, you're probably talking about 10, 15 IBUs at most out of this. I think there's a wee bit of IBU from the rye and some of the, you know, the earthy and kind of hoppy elements in there. So yeah, that goes together quite well in this one for sure. And then, yeah, you've also got the, as I say, you can see that the malt base is quite smooth in this one. It's a little bit more grainy. Then you've got the juicy, fruity characters and a little bit of the kind of sharper. As I say, you've got a little bit of the kind of sharper citricy kind of notes in there as well. So a wee bit of juicy berry, a little bit of a sharper citricy note in this one, but definitely not the most puckering beer that we've had from Brekeriet, or you know, from sour beers in general. But yeah, I think we can leave the review at that for this one. This has been an interesting beer, quite different from what I remember having had from Brekeriet before. But yeah, it's cool to have our first beer in a can from these guys as well. And I do have a veiled beer in the fridge that I need to take a look at as well. And that one, I think, is a collaboration with First Viacek, actually, from Germany. So yeah, you'll see that review appear at some point in the next couple of weeks too. But yeah, we can leave it at that for this one. So this one was the Tistron, a 4.8% blackcurrant sour beer from Brekeriet in Landskrona here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brekeriet, and we will return to these guys again soon. Thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out Brekeriet's social media, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Slange, Skål, and cheers.